Hey, good morning, afternoon. Sam here, Real Love Guitars, and the reason I'm doing a video today, I keep getting hot and cold in this damn shed. We're on 14 degrees at the moment. The reason I'm doing a video right now is I suppose it's a rare thing of having three kind of interesting, to me, personally interesting guitars in one place. And I actually have two of the first three guitars I ever owned, the actual guitars, plus one copy. So just to let you see what we have, let me take you on a little flight. Come with me and you'll see my first ever, well, this wasn't my first, this is a copy of my first ever guitar. This is the repulsive, hideous Satellite 65T. I've even gone as far as putting a Morris on it. I'll talk more about that later on, but the Satellite 65T. This thing was a toy guitar in the late 70s. Japanese made. It didn't have tuners like that, I can promise you. It had a sort of row of open tuners, but it was made of plywood. This one's split as you can see, made of plywood. It actually had made in Japan. Did it have made? It had made in Japan on sticker, I think. And this thing came all the way from Japan to a friend's mum's catalogue, which is where I got it from. And it used to have a big old flat arm, tremolo arm, which sort of made a horrible creaky sort of noise. And it was a way ahead of, well, no, it wasn't ahead of, it was a, it had taken the leaf out of Brian May's books and had two pickups on or off. That was your lot. Then these aren't the originals, but they're volume toned. These are the original pickups. Horrible little things. This is a replacement bridge, but it's pretty close to the original. But anyway, it's got that sort of uniquely flat slab looking thing about it, which is plywood with a sort of veneer that's sunbursted. Anyway. So I got this thing. I'm going to plug this back in and see if it makes a noise. But I got this, originally I got this out of a friend's mum's catalogue. And you can imagine my disappointment when I think we were about, I don't know, what were we, 1980? We must have been 16, 17, coming nearly 17. I got this thing. And I couldn't wait for the day when it turned up. So I went round to Paul's mum's, Paul's place, and got this thing out of its packaging. I can't even remember what the packaging was, and kind of to my horror realised it was a 3/4 sized thing. So it wasn't even guitar scale, normal guitar scale. But you know, I took it back home and I duly went ahead and learned a bit on it, you know, playing my, watching the strap's going to fall off, I know it, playing my favourite old Beatles songs or whatever, you know, and I taught myself to play a bit, but it was an absolutely hateful thing. Let's make it in tune. Oh, I know, I tuned it for open G. Let's tune it to normal. Yeah, that's it, folks, that's your lot. Bridge only. Well, you can see it works. think I did a gig, inverted commas, with my school friend Paul and our band at the time. I think we played Can't Buy Me Love by the Beatles in a horribly screaming, squealing schoolboy pitch. Buy you everything, my friend. Yeah, right. And then we did some Pink Floyd numbers. We did an obscure Pink Floyd track, which not many people know, I think, called Julia Dream. Beautifully out of tune, but sunlight bright upon my pillow, lighter than the eider down. Yeah, that one. Julia Dream, dreamboat queen, queen of all my dreams. And we played that in somebody's front room at this live gig, which we actually got on a C120 cassette, which I have a digital sample of somehow. I don't know how that happened, but it will never see the light of day. So anyway, this is a copy, obviously. My original one, I ended up painting this horrible thing white with kind of emulsion. It was horrible to play. This isn't that much better, but at least I tried my best to make this one play. The neck was so unresponsive on this, and of course it's a short scale, so I needed something like 11s to even get the slightest bit of curvature in the neck, but it still required a high action. I thought I'd put it to an open G tuning maybe and take it and have some fun and play Honky Tonk Woman on it or something in some local gig one day just for a laugh. But anyway, but then why would you if it just doesn't stay in tune much? I mean, I could probably make it stay in tune, but it is a hateful old beast. Eventually, I think not more than a year or so after I had it, I think I took the neck off, and I seem to remember, there you go, thanks, I seem to remember burying it in the woods near my home in Coventry at the time. But it was enough to get me playing along to, I think Sgt. Pepper. I had a book of Sgt. Pepper songs, all the chords, original chords, which I think taught me the little shapes and stuff, which I really enjoyed. Playing some Queen as well on this, and I think I kind of remember going around to parties and places, where anyone had an amp or a PA or something, and some of us guitar types would turn up, and just for any old opportunity to make this thing play really loud. But there you go. Anyway, look, that's a Satellite 65T. Sorry, I don't care about it. I really must say I had a go at setting this up. My sort of feeling was, let's see if I could set even the worst dog on earth up. And I have to say, I'm quite happy to admit that this beat me. This is so poor to begin with. This is about as good as I could make it play. As you can hear, it plays, but it's totally unlovable. There is nothing lovable about this thing. I'm just going to dangle it from here. Now that was my first ever guitar, and that's a copy of my first ever guitar. And by a miracle of time travel, this is the actual second guitar I ever owned. Aged, I got by this 1981, so aged 18, yeah, so that was about a year or so after this. And this is an Eko Ranger 6 from the olden days. It's not one of the very earliest, but it's from its kind of good tank, built like a tank era. And sometimes you can tell the pick guard here is something like 3.5 or something. It's a massive depth. It's this huge piece of plastic. On the later versions, this thing is in fact a kind of thin little facsimile, but on these sort of late 60s, early 70s, sorry, late 70s, early 80s EKOs, this is actually coming off. It feels like it could probably do with being glued down. On this particular era, this was characterized by this incredibly thick pick guard. Nothing would destroy it. Added about a pound of weight to it. But what I remember at the time was this beautiful quilted bag. I didn't even know what we would call it, but for a budget guitar, and I think this only cost about £60 new from the music centre in music shop in Coventry. And there was only one, I think, at the time. And this was bought, or the date on here, I put 1983. I think I scribed this when I was in America. Well, I think when I was in America, in Daytona Beach in Florida. But I actually had it for a couple of years already. But around this time, this is the heyday of the specials when I bought this. So it was a bit of a odd thing out because Coventry was hopping to the specials, jumping to the ska sound, and people like me, school kids like me and their school friends were buying these and playing sort of Irish jigs on them, things like that, or Stairway to Heavens, That's all I ever learned in the sixth form block at school. But this is kind of, it's quite something to be back with a guitar that you own from so long ago. And this, I sold this sometime in the late 80s to a friend of mine called Roger, who added this. A friend of his added this sort of mystery woman logo thing, and since he's owned it, Roger's played the hell out of it over the last 30 years or something, and also replaced the original tuners, which on these things were a kind of inline set of open tuners, which worked perfectly well, but they would have been ugly. And he's replaced these with a sort of bog standardy or medium standard Chinese pressed sealed set. I don't know what you call them, but the chromed things, low grade chrome things. But they actually work brilliantly. There's no problem with them at all. And the reason that this guitar in its day was actually, on the downside it was a heavy beast. On the upside you could beat the hell out of it as a school kid, and the guitar that is. And nothing bad would happen to it. As you can see, this thing has been battered, and the fact is it's survived 37 years or something. I bought it in 80, I think. 37 years. Roger's put a couple of what look like bullet holes, but they're I think they're kind of a domestic result of some sort of domestic fracas. And it's got cracks and splits. The top is splitting in lots of sort of longitudinal ways. It's had its day. It's in its dotage, but this guitar, and one of these things has worn the hell out, so the strings are in the wrong place. But what was great about this in its day was, first of all, it was rock solid. Secondly, although we didn't know it at the time, it had a bolt-on neck, which kind of made it possible, if you had your wits around you, you could have travelled with it, because it's pretty easy to take that off and stash the guitar. As kids back then, I remember taking this guitar to Florida in the softest, wimpiest bag. We didn't have gig bags in those days. We had PVC, melamine, that kind of horrible velour, that fake plastic rubbery bag stuff. Anyway, and this went in somehow. This went through the hold luggage once or twice, and in the airplanes. And I also remember forcing them in the old days to take it. You go down to the door and playing, please find somewhere for this, and the stewardess, oh god, I'll put it in the galley next to where I'm trying to cater for 300 hungry people. Some stupid student wants to take this to America with him, man. But they were accommodating those days, right to the fact that you could go and sit. I remember sitting up with the captain watching the landing, which landings? I certainly got to sit in and watch see the controls from the cockpit a couple of times. I used to ask them in mid-flight, hey, could you ask the captain if I'm really interested in aviation? I play simulators. 1988, I think it was F-19 stealth fighter on the IBM PC, that sort of kind of straight line graphics. And I'd go, yeah, I'm really interested in flight simulators. Yeah, come and see the captain, and sit up there for an hour in the dark of watching the moonlight on the clouds. Fantastic experience. Can't do that anymore. So this travelled overseas with no protection at all, and survived, not least because it's a tank. The real innovations on this thing were twofold, right? I can't really move that very easily, but one of them, you probably can see at the corner of your eye down here, is this guitar had a 0 fret, full stop, right? Now the 0 fret on this meant that for a budget studenty guitar, the 0 fret, because of the geometry of the way the guitar works, the 0 fret means you get a default pretty low good first fret action out of it. So you unlike a modern acoustic, which you pretty much, most of them that I ever see are way over at the first fret. I mean, some aren't, some people have set them up, some premium brands have them taken care of, but an awful lot of medium range budget guitars come with a mile high action down here, which makes them hellish to play and also results in notes going out of tune when fretted down here. But this thing came with a 0 fret, and you can see it there. The original nut might have been this one, for all I know. It's just probably just changed colour over the years. I don't see why it's been changed, but the nut has only one job really, and that's to hold the strings in a spacing, and the 0 fret, the first slightly large first fret, does the job of lifting them just over the next set of frets. So default action is really good. And then down at this end, this guitar came with an adjustable saddle in the bridge. I mean, what an innovation, figuring you might like to change the action on your guitar. If I'm absolutely honest, I can't remember how much I adjusted this or not. I seem to get used to the guitar and just learn to live with it. But one of the things that I really noticed when I picked this up yesterday, playing it for the first time in 20 plus years, probably, maybe even 30 years actually, is how easy it is to play, and actually how familiar, obviously, because it was a big part of my life at the time, but it's naturally very easy. Now the thing about being built like a tank is that I was aware, even at the time, that it was a bit dull sounding compared to all these other beautiful, sort of very finely built wooden acoustic guitars, maybe, you know, Yamahas, and even, you know, in that time, the heyday of Ovations and things like that, they seem to be have much more dynamic presence and jangly, tingly stuff. And this felt like always a bit of a sort of dulled old tank, and I guess that's always was, you know. But actually, when you listen to it now, it's not that bad, is it? Must have played that a few times on it. Of course, it's got dead strings on it anyway, but it's really interesting how easy it still is to play. Now the action isn't massively low, but it's down here that makes the difference. So I never remember this as being particularly hard to play, although I do remember it being a little bit sort of dull sounding. And it didn't inspire me after a while, and I think that's why I sold it. I wanted something with more sort of dynamics to it, and of course it was then probably another 20 years again before I bought a guitar, which was a Fender folk something. I mean, it's a basic acoustic guitar, but it was lighter built all round, and it had much more sparkle to it from the outset, and I still have it. It's a lovely guitar. So, but this is, you know, as a result, these things survive, and there are a lot of them around. What I also am amazed about with this one is that although the bridge is lifting slightly, and you can stick not much of a plectrum, but there is a lift starting, and I'm going to have a look at this, whether it needs to come off or whether it can come off and be re-stuck. Or, you know, in a sense it may. I don't like the idea of leaving it kind of raising up, but I want to kind of get a sense of whether it's actually going anywhere or whether it's sort of stable, because actually the action is not so bad. But in terms of things that I can do with this guitar, one of them is I'm not really going to try and fix the Mafia bullet holes or the big chips or the splits. I mean, this is a £50 guitar originally, and it still plays, and it's holding together, and it sounds great for what it is. There are certain things, like it needs a good clean up. One of the things that has amazed me on this guitar, I think first of all the nut needs replacing, because this D string here has worn its way sideways, so the spacing part of this nut isn't working anymore. So I need to build a new nut for this, and it's going to be white bone. I don't really have much alternative. I'm not going to find something blank of this colour material, I don't think. Not without spending forever looking for it. But anyway, so a new nut on here to space the strings better. I don't think the tuners need replacing. They seem to work so smoothly when I tuned it earlier on yesterday. Looking at the frets, it's quite astonishing that for a guitar that's 37 years old, and I know I played to death, there is almost no wear. I mean, okay, there's some notching as you'd expect on the 0 fret, but for 37 years it's surprisingly little, and the kind of grooves on the frets only extend to about here. Now, as an acoustic, it's probably not going to get a lot of play up here, not a hell of a lot anyway. But just generally speaking, I've got to say these frets have got to have been harder material than modern frets, because this is definitely not been refretted in the 37 years, and you, honestly, you could barely. I could probably do a fret level on this, a fret dress, rather than refret it. However, this is a kind of special guitar to me and to Roger, I know. And what I'm kind of thinking is, I didn't want to pull these frets and replace them with standard nickel, whatever, you know, modern fret wire, because the truth is, with a 0 fret, it would probably may very well notch up within quite a short amount of time. So I'm sort of toying with the idea of, because of all this lovely sort of colour and goldishness, I'm thinking, how about some Evo gold frets for this, some new Evo gold frets. And part of the reason is so that I can just get in there and re-radius this fingerboard and give it a kind of new lease of life, providing it's all in a good enough shape and there's nothing curvy or wobbly about it. But that's just a little thought. So we've got a couple of things. This is coming away, probably could do with coming off, cleaned up, put back on.